Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw. That would be WWE's favorite Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, all the above, Mr. Gerald Brisco. He's waiting on the hurricane right now. And we got the best writer in the history of writing since Shakespeare, Mr. Brian Gewirtz, also known as Brian Gewirtz, has a book out. There's simply one little problem. It's a great book because I bought it on Amazon for $27, and it was worth every single penny. He's also the only writer to ever go to Wrestler's Court. So we have Brian Gewirtz, my old Mets buddy, who's in a Buffalo Bills hat. Brian, welcome to the show.
Well, it's also football season. I want to spread the love a little bit. And thank you. Thank you for prosecuting me in Wrestler's Court. Thank you for screwing up the name of the title of the book. There's just one little problem. There's just one problem is the name of it, technically speaking.
That's kind of what I said.
Well, that's you're cute to say don't get hot because I have the over-under on don't get hots at about 25.
I learned English in the same geographical region of the states that Michael Hayes did, so I have an excuse. Wow. It's not my first language.
We plan on getting into a lot of Michael Hayes' legendary stories a little bit later. But Brian, man, you know you're wearing your Bills hat, man. I know you took a lot of ribbing, you know, when you first came to WWE about being number one a Bills fan and being a Mets fan, you know, and you took it a whole really good heartedly and everything. Now, after all of your loyalty is finally paying off, your Mets are at the top of the league, thanks to a Tampa boy, Alonzo Kidd, Tampa boy. They're at the top of the league, and even though Buffalo got beat last night, I still believe they're the best team in the AFC. So, man, finally, congratulations. And your Orange, don't forget your Orange got a big
Syracuse is very good this year.
I don't even know what to do with myself. This is not the natural order of things. Have the Mets, the Bills, and Syracuse all good at the same time.
Well, we're going to change your life right now. Yeah. So you've been on the podcast, man. Thanks so much. As you can see, you graciously sent me your book, you know, and I didn't have to go on Amazon. John jumped the gun, and he wanted to read it before I did, even though I got it a week after. I finished it like a week before because those Texans are a little slow when it comes to reading.
The big words confuse me.
Anyway, it was a great book, and you open up with a great story, but about Wrestler's Court, about JBL being a prosecutor. But you know, take us to a little before Wrestler's Court when you first walked into a WWE building. You know how that process came about and everything.
Yeah, so I mean, I really started working at WWE completely by accident. You know, it was never my intention to become a WWE writer, even though I love WWE. Starting, you know, I was like right the right age. I was 11 years old when the first WrestleMania hit. So I mean, that's pretty perfect. I remember going to sleepaway camp, and people were, you know, first exposure to Pro Wrestling Illustrated and the full color pullouts, and eventually we read other periodicals that probably, you know, would be a little bit more risque in the world. But at the time, 11 years old, it was mainly Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And yeah, that, you know, drew me in. The Saturday morning shows, the syndicated shows, Superstars and everything else, Saturday Night's Main Event, when I could stay up that late. As you guys know, Roddy, big influenced me. That's who, that was my guy. You know, Vince is always like, you know, you got to find who's your guy and who's your girl, you know, like that kind of thing. Who's your favorite? For me, it was Roddy. And yeah, I used to go to Nassau Coliseum, Madison Square Garden as a kid. And yeah, complete accident, you know, studying and yearning to be a television writer or sitcom writer. And then, you know, a gig at MTV basically led to a gig at MTV and Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara leaving for WCW. Those two things combined kind of led to me getting the opportunity to come to WWE and being, you know, one of two writers at the time, only two. It was me and Tommy Blachard, as you guys remember.
Yeah,
I remember Tommy well. I love Tommy.
That wasn't your original.
He never went to work.
Yeah, Tommy was a great guy. Tommy still corresponds with me every once in a while. I believe he's still up in Detroit area, up in that area there. But wrestling wasn't your first want. You, as you said, you know, you wanted to be a sitcom writer, so you went out to Hollywood and you had an opportunity to write several sitcoms out there. And then you had the opportunity through, I believe it was your sister or something. MTV was becoming hot in that rock and wrestling to start spreading out a little bit to MTV. So you jumped on that. That was your first introduction besides being a fan, right?
Yeah, that was my first. Besides, I did get to do one meet and greet at the Anaheim Pond when we all lived out there. I forget exactly the circumstances behind. Oh, I think it was because my college professor, Professor Thompson of Syracuse, he was also Mick Foley's professor when Mick Foley went to Cortland. And through some machinations, we got a nice Attitude Era meet and greet. I think it was with the Headbangers. There are pictures out there with me and all my college buddies, with the Headbangers, having the time of our lives. But that was, when WWE did those specials on MTV. Yeah, you're right, Jerry. My sister was, I wrote in the book an intern. She corrected me. She was a fully fledged production assistant at the time. She was hired. She was no longer interning. And yeah, I worked with, Rock and Mick and Triple H on on a couple of specials. And I think it was Rock who recommended, like, hey, you should go interview with WWE, see what happens. And so, yeah, that led to this crazy day of, driving from my parents' house on Long Island into Stamford, only getting lost once. I ended up in the Bronx on the way back home. That was fun. This is before GPS and navigation, very harrowing experience. But yeah, I met with HR, I met with Russo and Ferrara, I met with Shane McMahon, and then I ended the interview day with Vince McMahon, which is crazy because I had an inflatable Bopham Steve Austin thing in my apartment in LA at the time. Like, this is not a very professional person going in to do these interviews, but I did it. And one thing led to another.
How do you interview to be a writer?
Well, first of all, you don't do what I did because, as I pointed out in the book, like, HR was HR, that's fine. They'll tell you about, your key card and that kind of thing. Russo and Ferrara, all I talked about was what wrestlers are you thinking of spinning off into sitcoms and or dramas or movies, which is the last thing you should be bringing up when you're, trying to be a writer at WWE for the product at hand, Raw and SmackDown and all that. So that didn't go well. With Shane, I complained about how none of the sports bars in LA can get Mets games. So I'm looking forward to being home so I could watch them locally. He did not care for that one bit. Plus, he's a Yankees fan. He used to threaten.
It's right, non-sports fans. I mean, that entire family, I've never seen anything like it. They're just not sports fans besides WWE.
Yeah, well, Shane used to, especially when the Wilpons, owned the Mets, which they did my entire time in WWE. He used to like tease me. He's like, "Hey, Brian, how about thinking about maybe we buy the Mets?" I'm like, "Oh, that would be great." Yeah, I'm thinking about moving them to Jersey. Like, he just would do that just to get me upset. But yeah, like when I finally interviewed with Vince, and it was supposed to be Vince and Linda originally, but Linda had another meeting, so it was just me and Vince. And that's when I just said, "Screw it. This is where I'm just gonna talk about my love of WWE." And I brought up our Royal Rumble pools that we had in college. I brought up my favorite angles, my favorite matches, my favorite pay-per-views and all that. And so, unsurprisingly, in hindsight, that was the portion of the interview day that went the best. He was like into it. He never heard of Royal Rumble pools before. My sick WWE gambling connection somehow popped Vince in the room when we were talking about it. And,
pal.
Yeah, well, I told him the story was like, we used to not pick numbers, which is what you're supposed to do. Instead, we picked names, which is very risky because, as you know, sometimes the names all don't show up. But one guy got both well and done from the tag team Well Done. Those were his two entries. And Vince was like, "That guy's not going to win." So yeah, that's what really, the process is completely different now. Then now I think you write a sample, you write like an angle, they read your materials before they even interview you, all that type of stuff. But back then it was like completely just making it up as we go. And, one thing led to another. And that's what, brought me into that world.
So those are the
Sure
only
is.
two writers at the time were Russo and Ferrara were the only two, and then you were the third.
As far as I know, I mean, I think there might have been one other like more junior type writer, but all three of them went to WCW. So, that's when, because originally, Vince said, "I'll make you an offer you can't refuse and you'll come work for us." But I did refuse it because it was an offer to write on WWF.com at the time. And it's just like, dude, I'm not like leaving. I've written on 3 shows. I'm in the Writers Guild. I'm not going to, leave Hollywood to go, write about the big boss man's, favorite, snacks or whatever they were writing at WWF.com at the time. No offense. So I went back, I started writing on another show. And then I got the call. I got the call that there's been an opening. There's been a situation, as it was described.
Yeah, a situation.
So this
So
is in October.
what was it like when you came in? Because we didn't know what was going on. Russo and Ferrara, goes down to WCW. Jerry may have a much more better insight than I did. It's just the talent, but we didn't know if Russo had all the shows in his head or if he had the shows with him. What was it like when you first got there?
I mean, when I first got there, I started November 1st, 99. I remember that day. I forget a lot of days, but I remember that day specifically. I showed up extra early. I did not bring my luggage because it didn't occur to me that we would drive to the next town after the show. So I left all my stuff in the hotel room like an idiot. I got, again, I detail that in the book, but I know, there were no smartphones. I had a folder with an email printed from Vince's assistant at the time. And that's what ultimately let me into the building because they weren't letting me into the building. Some guy showed up who looked like he was 16 and saying like, "Oh, I work here now." And no, they had to they're like, "Who are you?" No one told us about it. They had to call Sean Selman, who works backstage. And he ultimately came and inspected the folder with the email. And he's like, "All right, I guess this guy works for us now." And then I got with, I saw Dr.
I'm
Tom
sorry, I'm getting a hurricane warning.
Oh, damn. Jerry, get out of there.
We can actually
Go
watch
ahead.
Jerry die today, which
Well, you
great.
wanted it on the show here. So I'm sorry,
That's right.
Brian. Finish your story.
Jerry's like Michael Hayes. We think he died about 20 years ago. We're not sure. But he's still,
Are you
he's still around.
physically okay? Are you okay to be there?
Yeah, it's not storming outside yet, but
right.
that's just a tornado warning down the street.
That's a horrible way to go, Jerry. Having to stay there while listening to me yammering on about Dr. Tom Prichard telling me to sit at the front table in the production meeting of my first day at WWE.
Yeah. Well, tell us about Dr.
Did he
Tom
really?
and that story. Yeah, what happened there? I've been this isn't the time where I came out. Well, I remember I had to come. This a couple of weeks later, I think I had to come out and get you in the building one time.
Yeah, it did happen multiple times because I didn't get to see it immediately. It wasn't exactly the tightest run ship. No, Dr. Tom was the only one in the production meeting at the time when I got there. He was there super early. And I'm like, "Oh, cool. I know Dr. Tom. I know who he is. I didn't really know, his full prowess at the time. I'm not going to bring up the body donnas or anything like that. I'm going to try to play it cool, professional." And then, we were just talking. I'm like the new person. And he's like, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I'm the new writer or one of the new writers." And he's like, "Oh, well, you're not supposed to be sitting here. You should sit up there." And he pointed to the front of the table. Which technically he was correct because if you recall at the time, like all the writers used to sit at the front of the table back when there was like a writing team of like less than 4. So we were all up there, but the room was filling up and I'm just sitting there at the front because Vince and Triple H and Shane and Stephanie, everyone was late. So it was just like a room full of people and me. And I'm like not introducing myself to anybody, which is the exact opposite of what I should have been doing. I should have been out of that chair and like literally walking up to everybody, shaking everyone's hand. Instead, it was like, "Hey, how's it? What's that?" I'm just like,
Tremendous.
Yeah. And then they came in. And to answer your question, John, like, no, I mean, at least by November 1st, and I don't think there was like much in the way of stuff that was already written anyway, because it was very week to week, especially when SmackDown came and it was a different live show every single week. We had a little bit more time to plan things out when it was the old way, pre-SmackDown of Raw Live, or Raw taped on Tuesday, and then like literally 12 days until you have to write TV again. This was now, it was 2 shows a week, every single week. So I remember, yeah, Vince came in like the card, he had a rudimentary card written like on a napkin or something like that. And he started reading the segments. I keep waiting for him to introduce who the hell I am. He never did. he forgot. And then we were off to the races, you know, and at the time it was, you know, me and Tommy Blachard running around with yellow notepads, if you remember that, just like walking up to any wrestler saying, hey, do you need help with the promo or anything? We're here if you want it. It was very, very 1.0 in the evolution of the WWE writing position.
Did you know Tommy before that?
No, I didn't know who he was. I knew, obviously, you know, it's funny because he was a longtime writer at Conan, and I was an intern at Conan, but I was an intern at Conan. Conan's like the end of his first season, and I think Tommy started shortly thereafter that. So
Yeah.
we never crossed paths. And I think he was famously had, you know, bleach blonde hair and was wearing clogs. I think this was well before the WWE dress code. And
He
so
told me
no,
we're doing a backstage. He did all of me and Ron's APA stuff. We love Tommy. He told us
he
one time, he goes,
pitched the APA.
what's that?
He pitched the APA originally.
Did he really?
Yeah, I remember, like, you know, Tommy pitched the APA, and he also pitched the original, something that Jerry is very familiar with, the original hardcore title. I mean, not the hardcore title, 24/7.
Yeah.
Making the hardcore title 24/7.
Hey, Tommy did a Sunday Night Heat one time. He just had us, Kai and Tai chasing us chasing Kai and Tai. Stupid story, but it was a thread throughout the whole show. He did like a 4.1 on Sunday night.
Yeah,
that was when ratings were different, and the world was different. But I love Tommy. I thought Tommy was great.
Yeah, no, we still keep in touch. I talk to him every now and then.
He told us one time, he said, guys, you got to get this right this time. I said, why? Are we going live? He goes, no, you're slurring your words. Me and Ronnie got drunk. That's the only time ever.
It's just that time?
Yeah, no, only at once.
I don't think you guys are in it anymore, but, you know, we still do the XFL, which is not the new football league coming out, but it's EXFL, which is the weekly football pick'em pool of ex-WWE employees along with current ones, you know, and pick 7 teams every week. He's still in that, and so am I. And freaking Kasama wins it every year, so I don't know why we end up doing it.
Is that one that you've had forever? I think I used to be in that.
Yeah, you should be in it.
Yeah, I just send me the email. It hadn't changed.
Yeah, well, Nick Manfredini runs it now, so I'll have to let him know. But it's all computer based. Back in my day, I used to just tally them all up, write them, you know, on the road as Ed and I were driving to town, because you guys know, no one trusts me to drive because I will fall asleep almost immediately.
I remember BFG Lizard or something like that.
Well, that was the old AOL
years ago. Yeah, don't exist anymore.
Yeah, you talk about money, Jerry,
I think John and I are the only two that still use AOL Mail.
That's right.
You know, there are a lot of what's the best word to use? Legends. Who, whenever I get their email, it's still the old AOL one. So congrats for staying loyal.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Michael Hayes is duke.com on AOL.
Yeah. Michael doesn't do emails.
No, he doesn't do emails. So Jerry, you talk about money and Mets fans. Brian and I had season tickets together to the Mets, and they were like really not that close. Actually, the game would end like an hour before it got to us. That's how far back our seats were.
You know, I've been getting a lot of requests on that social media junk, you know, to clarify for Brian. You know, they've heard your story a million times, and you know, all the way over to LaGuardia, you know, and a crown room. You could was closer than your seats.
That's right.
Brian,
Mr.
Brian,
Met.
would you take a minute or two and clarify, you know, how great your seats actually
First
were?
of all,
Mr. Met
John,
looked like a normal sized baseball from where we were.
so let me explain this, and I'll do it without visuals, even though I've sent John visuals before. Shea Stadium consisted of the orange seats, which was the field level seats, which I know a big fancy millionaire, make more money now, John Bradshaw Layfield on Amazon.com.
It's had more money now. You talk about me butchering your book, and
Yeah.
I'll send you one of mine for free.
Well,
I
thank
have a lot of them because nobody wanted to buy them.
I got one.
So there's the orange seat, which is field level, and then right above it is the loge level, which consists of box seats, which are like the first like 3 rows, and then general, you know, with the long stuff, you know, seats 1 through 20 in a long row. And then there's mezzanine that does the same deal. That's the green seats. And then there's upper deck, which is the red seats, which also has box seats and then general. And the way John would describe it, you would think we were in the last row of the upper deck. We had loge box seats, which is, and by the way, not in the outfield either. This is like literally right in between third base and home, loge box seats, which they were like the perfect seats. And I have them in my apartment in New York because I bought them because John
You
did
bought the
it.
seats when
Yeah.
the stadium collapsed or whatever it was, because it was like 150 years old, the stadium, when we went.
When you
You
were
got
going.
the seats.
Yeah, and I wanted to get the little, you know, the little placard that came with it that said Gewirtz, Layfield, and Morphy, because we also split it with Raphael Morphy, and they lost that. So I never got that, but I do have the seats, and they are great seats. And I know John is accustomed to sitting like in the like right behind home plate or right above the dugout. So in relation to that, yes, they are not what you know
They're not Layfield seats.
accustomed to. But for any other regular, normal human being, they're amazing seats. But I think John only went to like 2 out of the 30 games he had tickets for. So he might not remember them as well as I did because I'd show up to every game.
And he was probably not sober either when they attended it.
Yeah, and the best part, hey, Jerry, the best part was this was awesome. So I worked on Wall Street, and then at the Fulton Fish Market, they had a ferry that took you all the way to Shea Stadium. So you get on the boat and you ride up top, have a drink, smoke a cigar, and go all the way to Shea Stadium, watch the game. Then I take the ferry back to like 55th or something like that. A lot of times Brian would do the same thing. We'd take it back to there, and then we get off and go back to our homes. It was awesome taking the ferry.
Ferry. They don't do it anymore, I don't think. Hopefully Steve Cohen can bring back the ferry. I don't know if he has anything to do with it, but the ferry was tremendous.
The ferry was awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so cool to get on the ferry with a bunch of Mets fans, and they're all going up to the game. They're all drinking, smoking cigars on the ferry, going up there and watch the game, and then take the ferry on the way back. Especially if they win, then everybody's excited.
Yeah, no offense to the 7 local, but yeah, the ferry is definitely the way to go. Ferry has no idea. No, but trust me, it's definitely better.
So do you still have those seats, Brian?
Well, those seats, yeah, I mean, those seats are in my apartment, which, you know, if I was there now, I'm in
We can
Memphis
show us, we get a show.
for season 3 of Young Rock. But, you know, John would actually be proud because I finally gave in. You know, they did this gimmick where if you buy a 20 game pack for 2023 season tickets at Citi Field, you're eligible to have 2022 postseason tickets. And I went in on that, even though I might not even be there for a lot of it. But I said, I don't care. I just want to have that option. And so my 2022 postseason tickets, which I'll have for every other game, is the tickets that John thinks my Shea Stadium tickets are. They are in the upper deck, literally the last row of the upper deck is where I'll be watching postseason baseball, and it will be worth every cent. But that's where the narrative of our Shea Stadium tickets would be accurate in my 2022 Citi Field post. I don't know if anyone cares about this, but
yeah, they do. I've got at least 3 requests to ask Brian about the season 3. So, you know, and a couple of them, an attorney and New York City that goes to Mets games, and I actually went to a Tampa Bay Ray game with the gentleman down here. But thanks for clearing that up. And you know who'll be the Mets in the playoff. You know who'll be the first one to ask you, "Hey, Brian, can I use your seat if you're not able to do it?" That guy sitting up in the corner.
Well, especially because he's busy with The Rock filming Young Rock and Tales of the Territories, which apparently comes out with you, Jerry, on October 4th, apparently.
That's right. I mean, Jerry Brisco, absolute legend, we have a show called Tales from the Territories, we created with the creators of Dark Side of the Ring, Evan Hunsey and Jason Eisner, and it's coming out on Vice very, very soon, October 4th, a different territory every single episode. And Mr. Brisco was nice enough to grant us our request to have him on for the Florida territory episode. So this is going to be really, really fun. I've seen cuts of the show, obviously, and it's great. I think you guys and wrestling fans in general are really going to like it.
Well, Brian, I appreciate it. I really appreciate being asked for that. And I got to tell you, you know, you watch Vice TV, you watch the Dark Side of the Ring. I wasn't really wild about doing it, but you personally called me and then told me, and man, going to Atlanta, you guys flew us up to Atlanta, and a great studio we were in, really good studio, and the people there were so prepared for the show. That's what really impressed me and the other guys on the panel, was just how knowledgeable they were and how much research they had done and the questions they asked. So it's just not some generic show. We really get in depth in a lot of the questions. We tell some old stories that John loves me telling about Eddie Graham drunk flying the plane and all this stuff. But you know, all of us told the same story, so it's not just me making this.
Hey, wait, Jerry. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you off, Jerry. But I gotta interrupt. You know, one of the best stories about Eddie Graham's plane was Rocky Johnson jumping out of the plane while it's taxiing, while it's going down.
It's on fire. It's on fire. Yeah, it's on
because
fire.
The plane got caught on fire because somebody might have been smoking a little weed in the back. It caught the plane on fire, and Rocky Johnson jumped out of the plane while it was moving.
Yeah.
We're taxiing
down the runway. When he opened that door, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here, man. Rocky's gone. And pretty soon everybody's following behind him because we can see the smoke billowing out of the bathroom there.
But you know what, Jerry, to your point, that was, you know, that's what I was telling you on the phone was like, you know, Dark Side, some people really like it. Some people, you know, don't. And, you know, it's a really good show. But we wanted our show to be different. We wanted this new show to not, you know, to really capture the wild, the crazy, the unbelievable, like these stories that, you know, we would hear backstage all the time at WWE as writers coming in. You know, we were able, especially when I started and the agents, you know, the producers / agents of you and Pat and Jack Lanza, you know, like this like Hall of Fame row of legendary storytellers and everything, like that, like sitting in those meetings, waiting for Vince and everybody to show up and hearing these stories, like that's really more the inspiration than anything on Dark Side. You know, because Dark Side, it's its own entity, but we wanted to do something, you know, that was a little different. Obviously, Rock, you know, being third generation, has heard a ton of these territory stories as well, and really wanted to, you know, like, let's capture that. Let's take it out from the locker rooms and have it, you know, on a national audience level.
Was that your suggestion, or was that Dwayne's suggestion that you do the territories? Because that's something that John's talked about for a long time. You know, WWE should do, or somebody should do the territory days.
It's always, you know, we've always had that idea. All of, you know, just, and I know lots of people have had that idea. And it's, you know, between podcasts and everything else, you know, it's, you know, it's something that anyone who's heard a territory story or two, you know, would obviously, you know, shine to and say, hey, that could be a great TV series. So, you know, when we met, you know, we had a general with Evan and Jason, the Dark Side creators, years ago. And we're like, hey, we've been thinking about a territory show. And he was like, wow, that's funny, because we've also been thinking of a territory show. And Chavo Guerrero, who works on the show, had also been thinking of a territory show. So we all like kind of got together and pitched it to Vice, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. So it all came together, you know, quite nicely once, you know, we all, you know, finally were able to pitch it.
I saw an interview you did, Brian, and you're talking about the show, and it was really cool the way you said it, you know, because it's true. all of these territories were worlds within themselves. And you had your huge stars, you had your crazy stories, but you had 30 of them around the country or whatever the number was. And every territory had their own dynamic that was so unique to that territory. And now it's so cool to interview these guys because the statute of limitations is out. You know,
Yeah.
you interview a guy now, he can't talk about what he did last week, but you interview a guy and ask him about what he did in 78. He doesn't care at all. He just tells you the whole story. You know, it's just because it doesn't matter anymore. You don't have to hide behind the veil. You don't have to kayfabe. You don't have to, none of that's there. You're just going to tell the story, which I think is such a wonderful idea.
Yeah, no, thanks. And the beauty of it is, you know, there isn't an hour's worth of Memphis stories or Portland stories or Florida or you know, world class. You know, there's tons. There's literally seasons worth of stories. So we can go back to these territories in seasons 2, 3, beyond. You know, whether it's the same panel, different panel, there's just so much to tell. That yeah, this is, you know, it's just basically a fountain of great, unbelievable but true stories that we have at our disposal.
Yeah, when you start hearing some of these stories, they're hard to believe. You know, it's funny because I sat around with some friends a while back and they said, "Hey, tell us a wrestling story that's kind of wild." I start telling it to them and they're looking at me like, "That can't be true." And I thought, why am I even telling you? You're not going to believe me. And it's 100% true.
Yeah.
I mean, guys back then, you know, I thought it was a confluence of a lot of factors. You had really entertaining, creative, crazy guys, and you had no outlet like social media or cell phones or anything. So all you had was each other and a lot of boredom. And that made for some incredible stories because of all of that together.
And too, John and Brian, we're in a damn car for 8 hours. I mean, you know, you got
Right.
you got no phone that you can sit there and, you know, read the latest news. You had to come up with shit there on the road, or you wasn't asked to be back in that car the next week. You know,
That's
so
right.
you had to contribute every time you were in a car there. So it just made traveling so much better and quicker, you know, to share those stories. And you always, when the new guy would come into the territory, you would want that new guy traveling with you because you'd want to know what was going on in his territory and what, you know, what got over there, and, you know, how he's wanting to know what he could do to get over in your territory. So it was a great educational system that we had there, just sitting in that backseat of the car. And, you know, you hear all of those stories, you know, old timers used to tell a kid, you know, sit back there and shut your mouth. That was a fact. You just sat back there and you shut your mouth and you did say it, but you learned so much doing it, you know. And I think that's what Brian and Dwayne's show, Tales of the Territory, is going to bring to the forefront. Is that there, like Brian said, there were individual stars in each one of these territories. We've had a lot of guys on our show, John, that, you know, that was regionalized, and that's a shame that, you know, they're not known, you know, nationwide or globally like a lot of the WWE guys. But they, in their time, they were just as big as stars, and they were selling out every building. The building might not have been as big as the buildings they're selling out now, but they sold out the buildings that they had there. So, you know, it was a wonderful time in our business, and I really think that this show that's coming on Vice TV, Tales of the Territory, is going to just really enhance the stories and enhance the legends of those territories there. So I appreciate, Brian, what it was. I had a really enjoyable 8-9 hours, whatever it was there. Guys, like I said, were very knowledgeable, very professional. And if you didn't want to talk about something, you know, they were great. You know, let's go on to the next thing. So we all had a great time there. I think every one of, I can only speak to the one I did for Florida, but I'm sure every one of them was just as quality as that one was. So congratulations. I think you got it
Yeah,
there.
I think you'll really like the finished product because, you know, we do the roundtable, which you were part of. And then, as you know, we shoot these recreations up in Canada. And then the stories that you guys are talking about are sitting around the roundtable then come to life. And then, you know, and then going back to you and then back to the story and everything else. So it's really cool. I think wrestling fans are really going to like it.
I can't wait to see the finished product.
Yeah. You guys are basically a podcast on steroids, right? I mean, really. I mean, like the Young Rock, it's a podcast. It's just recreations and it's televised. You know, it's a show instead. And You know,
Yeah,
but
well,
the concept is very much the same. It's a telling of what others have tried to do. You guys are just doing it visually in a much better way.
hopefully, yeah, that's the idea. But segueing for a second, John, because you mentioned Young Rock comes out 1 month after Territories, literally 1 month, November 4th. Territories is October 4th. So yeah, in the past, Young Rock was, you know, out in, I think, January, out in March. We were shooting in Australia. That's all been changed. Now we're coming out November 4th. We've already shot, you know, we shot all of Rock stuff, his timeline. He started posting. This is the first time he's actually able to physically meet the cast members playing his family. Because we had Zooms and everything where, you know, where he would talk about his dad and his mom would be on Zooms too, and his grandmother and his grandfather, but never actually physically in the same town, because he would shoot his stuff in either Atlanta or LA in the past, and we were always shooting in Australia. And now all of it is here in Memphis. So he was actually able to meet, you know, Uli and Joe Anderson and Bradley and Adrian, all the versions of Young Rock, as well as, you know, Joe, who plays his dad, Stacy, who plays his mom. It was really, really cool. I know he's posted about it on Instagram. And yeah, now this season is crazy, because this season, you know, it's Dwayne, aka The Rock, in the Attitude Era. You know, it's the Rocky Maivia turning into The Rock period of time. So, you know, we'll see, you know, without spoiling anything, but you'll see a lot of Attitude Era stars. Some were on the show last year. There's going to be a lot of new characters who are very, very familiar to wrestling fans on the show this year. If you know the story of Rocky Maivia, you could probably guess who it is. But a lot of close personal friends of you're both, you both.
I know who they might be.
Yeah, exactly. There might be a whole nation of people if you.
Tremendous. Well put.
Yeah.
What a great time in his career, though, man. That faction was awesome. That faction, I don't know if you consider it underrated, because I don't know where they rate it, but that faction was incredible.
Oh yeah, it's really, really cool, and to see these come to life. And then at the same time too, because, you know, it's multiple timelines. We're headed right into the rock and wrestling era. You know, in the mid '80s with you know, with Hogan and Piper and a whole bunch of other, like, you know, stars of that era, both wrestling and Hollywood, from you know, the 1985 era. So it's absolutely so cool to see it all come to life. And yeah, there's going to be people talking after that, after the premiere episode on November 4th. I'll just say that.
Speaking of that era, one of our mutual buddies who sold out the Superdome one time, and was not afraid to tell you about it. And me and Mr. Brisco are the only friends in the whole world of Bruce Prichard. So we have two commonalities between a Freebird and Bruce Prichard. The doot that Bruce Prichard has said for years, he stole from you, right?
Yeah, that's 100% accurate.
100%.
I love it. I love it.
I used to do that.
Has Bruce admitted that?
I mean, he knows it. I mean, I don't know.
Of course he does.
To admit it, and I was fine with it. You know, it's funny because, you know, I will call Bruce on the set of Young Rock all the time. I'll be like, "Hey, who did so and so face? And like, what was this person like backstage?" And he's like, "Well, you know," and he'll give me a great answer and very, very helpful. And then when I see him, it's like, "Hey," and Michael's the same way too with the Michael Hayes character. They're both but Bruce specifically is like, "Hey, yeah, well, keep waiting for my paycheck from Young Rock to come in, considering all this information I'm giving you all the time." And I'm like, "Well, that's interesting, because I'm waiting for all the royalties from the doot fanny packs and T-shirts you sell."
There, Bruce has so many paychecks coming in, he wouldn't just say, "Bruce, I sent it," and it'd be in that stack of paychecks.
He wouldn't know. Yeah.
He got 50 sources of paychecks coming out.
Oh yeah, he's filthy rich.
Well, I'm just saying, we both kind of borrow from each other liberally and, are cool with it. At least I'm cool with it. I'm sure Bruce is too. I mean, he's,
That's not what he told us, Brian.
No, he told us
he
something.
paid
He
for his
told us
mansion in
completely
Connecticut.
different.
I know that.
And let's get off that subject area. I want to get on, and Wrestler's Court is such a legendary part of our business, of WWE's business, especially back when all three of us were running around there. You got hauled into Wrestler's Court. Kind of walk us through what happened for you to get that and the scene. I read it in your wonderful book back here. There's just one problem by Brian Gewirtz, and so you can get
Did
it
you
on
get
Amazon
yours free,
or any
Mr.
place.
Brisco?
Yeah, I got mine sent to my doorstep, John.
Right.
Wow, I got mine sent to my doorstep because of Amazon Prime, but I had to pay for it.
Yeah, you don't know the right people. But anyway, tell us about
Apparently
that
I don't.
chapter 1, and you don't beat around the bush, brother. You go right into the meat of WWE.
Yeah.
You go right into Wrestler's Court to get everybody's attention.
Well, yeah,
just like
exactly.
you did in all those overtime segments that you used to write for in ring segments.
Well, that's how we used to write TV, right? You got to have something that captures the attention right away. And I know if I'm like, well, I started watching Taxi as a young, nobody cares about that. You want to get into the stuff that everybody, wants to hear about. So Wrestler's Court, which was a complete shock to me. I mean, because I was riding high. If people don't know, this Wrestler's Court happened literally. This was the SmackDown after WrestleMania 17, which was considered, one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. And I remember, and I specifically was producing all the backstage vignettes for WrestleMania 17, running around like a lunatic. And I was asking, Bruce, are you going to help? He's like, I'm in the gimmick battle royal. I can't do anything. So I'm like, okay, great. So I was producing all of them, and it was a huge success and really well received. And then we did, I think it was Rock versus Austin in a cage the next night on Raw. Another, that's what kind of was Rock send off to then go do, Scorpion King. And then Tuesday in Oklahoma City, I was told you're going to Wrestler's Court. And it just blindsided me. I had no idea, A, what Wrestler's Court was, B, why I was going. And then, yeah, it was this whole thing where they're like, I'm like, don't we have a show to write? I'm like, it's SmackDown, it's tape. Go to your Wrestler's Court. And Stephanie specifically said, bring beer and pizza. And in my head, I'm just envisioning this tribunal, this small, like 6 people on a panel, like the opening of Superman, if you remember that movie, except they'd be there live and not in hologram form. So anyways, I ran to concessions. Concessions wasn't open yet. I bribed the guy to get me a 6-pack and a box of pizza. Because I'm like, all right, we'll make this quick. And then when I showed up, it was literally every wrestler, every agent, every backstage production person, the seamstresses, the caterer, literally the entire company, except Vince, was there. And it was me and Edge and Christian.
WWE basically shut down for that hour and a half for your Wrestler's Court.
Absolutely. There was nothing going on. There was no rehearsals. There was no one going over their matches. Literally shut down.
And this is a live 3-hour, 2-hour at the time show that we got to produce for that night coming on air, and at the time don't change. So we're taking the lead writer and putting him in Wrestler's Court.
Well, Jerry, in defense of WWE, also one of the first times we're on the new network, like Spike or whatever it was, we shut down the entire company to watch Chimmel race Jonathan Coachman and then stayed around for a mile lap. The entire
priority
shut down.
So yeah,
well, that was not. It was not unprecedented.
This was.
We would shut down for anything.
Sorry, Brian.
No, this was like I think JR was getting beat up by Stone Cold. I mean, we were in Oklahoma, so of course.
Yeah.
But Stone Cold had just turned heel and joined forces with Mr. McMahon. My point is, this is a huge show, and we need to stop it for Wrestler's Court because I was accused of taking payola from Edge and Christian. Edge specifically, I don't even know why Christian was there. He didn't give me anything. At least I could have got another gift out of it. And the 3 of us were on trial for, basically them giving me gifts for TV airtime, which was news to me. That's not why I was putting them on TV, but the subtext, as you always know, there's subtext behind the charges of wrestler's court. It's like you're too big for your britches or whatever. In this particular case, it was you're getting too chummy with your best friends here at the expense of, all the other wrestlers that, you're not, hanging out with and playing games, video games or whatever. I'm not describing it well, but the point is everyone was there. Undertaker was the judge. Kane was the bailiff. I did not have a defense attorney. It never occurred to me. I had no idea what was happening. There was no defense attorney. What? No. And then the prosecutor, the person who was basically conducting this sham of a trial, this witch hunt, was Bradshaw. He wasn't even JBL yet. He wasn't this clean cut, Bermuda living, financial planning, proud, WWE Hall of Famer. This was long dyed black hair, mustache, beard,
black.
2 months, a year or two removed from Uncle Zebekiah running around with his rope and everything. This is hardcore Bradshaw. This is scary Bradshaw. And he's the prosecutor. And yeah, that's how it started. It was very, again, as outlined in the book, he's like, all right, Mr. Gewirtz, are you ready for the trial? And
I don't sound like that.
Yeah, you do.
Jerry, do I sound like that?
Yes, you do.
And I made the mistake of correcting you, which I shouldn't have done. And then, yeah, you guys remember, because I remember Jerry was sitting right next to Kurt Angle, and Kurt was very nice enough to tip off Edge and Christian to what was happening, to allow them to make props and gimmicks for the trial that got big laughs. He did not tip off me.
That's right.
So yeah,
They brought the book on how to kiss ass.
Yeah,
They made pop the entire court.
Yeah. And then when I tried to joke about the Flash's origin story, because Edge had given me a Flash action figure, it was, that like old Warner Brothers cartoon where where Bugs and Daffy are doing their shtick, and Bugs gets like huge applause, and then Daffy does the same exact thing, just dead silence. That was me with Edge and Christian, except instead of dead silence, it was actually open hostility. It was a very, very fun time.
So you have a good feeling about wrestler's court.
Yeah, well, it was, as I recall, the court, like after Edge and Christian did their comedy, their prop comedy, the trial basically was just JBL, Bradshaw just bringing out witness after witness after witness against me specifically. So it was like, here's Hardcore Holly, and here's X-Pac, and here's Taz. And it's like, Taz, how many times have you produced Sunday Night Heat? All of them. How many times was Mr. Gewirtz there? Twice. Once for the first show, and second time for Edge and Christian. No further questions.
Now, you mentioned the name there. To fill us in a little bit on Hardcore Holly and your relationship up to that point. It was pretty tight, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it was. Well, Hardcore Holly, Bob Holly was the one who saw Edge give me a Flash action figure. Edge was at a comic book store, had a signing or something. Someone gave him a Flash action figure. He knew I liked the Flash, which I did, although I'm kind of a poser because I stopped reading comic books in like 1985, but I didn't tell them that. I'd still wear the t-shirts and stuff. So he gave me the doll. Bob saw it. That's what kind of prompted the court to be in session.
I didn't realize that. I couldn't remember what caused the court to be commenced for anyway.
Yeah, that was it. It was Bob seeing the
he was an eyewitness on the bribery then.
Yeah, eyewitness for bribery, but it wasn't like, great, we're going to be in
eyewitness to bribery.
Yeah. It was just like, oh, here's this Flash thing someone gave me. Okay, great. But that was a lot of time. If you guys remember, I was also accused of bringing Edge and Christian to my parents' home on Long Island for dinner, which people absolutely 100% like believe that happened, and that never happened. It wasn't even like we planned it and then we called it off. Like that literally was never a thing that was even discussed. But it was still, like Steve Blackman swore by it. It's like, well, that's not what I heard. I know you guys. And I'm like, well, what if I did? So what? How does that affect any of you? But the point is, all of it, was really to send a message, which I didn't, fully appreciate at the time, but I did as time went on, which is like if we didn't like you or think you had potential, well, certainly at the time, Bob Holly, X-Pac, and they did not like me, don't get me wrong. But if we didn't at least think like you had some potential, we wouldn't be shutting down the entire backstage of SmackDown for
That's
an hour and a half.
100% right. That's 100% right. We never, because when court would work, people would come to like me or Taker and say, hey, we want to take this person to wrestler's court or whatever, over something, usually silly or, whatever it was. But if it's a guy we didn't care about or girl, we never took them to court. They're not going to be here very long, and it doesn't matter. There's no reason to do it. It's just going to end up in a fight or something. If it was somebody that we thought belonged, we would do it and make it entertaining and have a good time, and everybody would hopefully end up at the end of it coming together and being friends, which was the idea.
And I really, I appreciated it a little bit at the time. I appreciated it even way more as time, expanded. I remember because it wasn't fun when we were getting into my stuff. And I remember Kurt looking a little peeved, and I wrote about it in the book. Mr. Brisco, I think Kurt Angle has something to say about this. And then you turned to Kurt and like, oh, Kurt, finally someone on behalf of the defense, would you like to say something on behalf of Mr. Gewirtz?
I don't sound like that, John.
Kurt rises up and then he goes, no, I don't.
Yeah.
What the hell? And then afterwards he explained to me like, oh man, if I said something on your behalf, it would have made it 20 times worse. And Jericho was like, oh, you should have asked me to be your defense attorney. I would have buried you, but it would have helped you in the long run. I'm like, I brought a single pizza and beer and a 6-pack of beer. I thought there'd be 6 people here. I had no idea there'd be like literally over.
That
50
was actually one of the funnest parts, as Jerry knows, was the defense attorney, because there's always a defense attorney that would have some preposterous claim that they would say takes this person and makes them obviously innocent, which never worked.
No, but and then Pat came in late, and Pat couldn't read the room, and it was like real serious at the time. And my Pat is even worse than my JBL. My Pat sounds like Count Dracula. Pat is like, that little shit, he changes the matches. And then Heyman testified, like it was a whole thing. And then I know at one point Austin just walked out because he's like, this is, why are we wasting so much time on this? But ultimately it was for the best. I think it really did, strengthen, my resolve. And I remember afterwards, Pat came up to apologize. He's like, I thought everyone was ribbing. I didn't know it was serious. And then I actually asked Pat for one of his cigarettes and smoked it then and there after court had ended. That's just how traumatic it was.
I remember that too.
I never smoked a cigarette after that. But I did, one of Pat's cigarettes at the time. And yeah, it was, and then the show went on and Vince was like, all right, seg 1, where are we? I'm like, where are we? I've been fighting for my life for the past 90 minutes. I don't know where we are. I can't even think about the show now.
So Brian, that was one of your beginning deals, but I wasn't there. But reading your book, I read your last appearance at WWE. You've been drugged through wrestlers' courts. You ribbed and everything because people really admired and respected you, and as an outsider coming in, how hard that respect is, because you see many writers come in and last a week just because they didn't get along. But anyway, tell us a little bit about your last appearance and the emotional.
I know you got to be gone here in about 3 minutes, so we.
I'm getting that question. I might have 10 minutes. Well, it was. First of all, thank you. Thank you, Jerry, because as I did write in the book, and I never forgot it, I was so frazzled. Like my first or second week, that first of all, I'd always run in interrupting people without waiting for them to finish talking, which people do to me now, and I lose my mind. And I was doing it back then. It's just so tunnel vision. And then I ran up to you and, asked you something, and then you gave me an answer, and I very suavely and confidently said, "Thank you, Jack."
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, that's something you don't normally do, to survive long.
Especially somebody that never met my brother Jack.
Yeah, exactly. Knew of him. So, yeah, that was fun. But yeah, my last show at WWE working officially, because whenever Rock comes back, I still come back too. But the last official show was in Washington, D.C., which was the exact same arena that my first show was at, where Dr. Tom, told me to sit at the front of the table. So that was really cool to be able to, finally like bookend it like that. And yeah, I mean, look, there's like a lot of stories, as all of us have, a lot of crazy up and down stories with Vince, with Mr. McMahon. And I certainly went through my share of them, both good and bad. I get into, kind of, for the most part, it was actually very smooth sailing. But then like the last, year, basically once I took myself off the road to join the home team, which was an experiment that I was trying to do at the time to stop traveling and stop going to TV. That's when things started to fracture a little bit. But it ultimately all came full circle, and I had a really nice, heartwarming moment with Vince, with Paul, with Stephanie. I think Shane was there too. I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to remember, but either way, it was really heartwarming to be able to be at that same arena 16 years later.
Wow.
After like so many promos, so many angry stares from Gerald Brisco in gorilla position, as a Rock promo is designated for 12 minutes, and we're at the 6-minute mark and he hasn't started yet because he's taken in the crowd, and Jerry looking at me like, what 12 minutes? How do you
fun time.
This is a live show. And then later, Kidman, I have so much heat with the people with the stopwatch at the gorilla position who are timing the show, and whose job it is to keep the show running and moving and make sure that we go off the air on time. Because, well, let's just say a good portion of my segments would sometimes occasionally go heavy.
Occasionally.
Raw too, where it's like SmackDown, it was like, all right, well, we'll fix it in post or whatever. Raw, you don't have that luxury. So yeah, I'm sorry for an occasional promo. Certainly no more than 3 or 4 over the course of 16 years.
No.
I wish.
Fun time.
Yeah.
Brian, before you go, one question I want to ask, because I saw an interview you did where you were answering this question. We did research on you, by the way.
That's amazing.
We enjoyed it. And
yeah,
promos, and I'm not talking about bashing the current group. We don't do that. But like the difference in promos, my generation, and especially older, Jerry's generation, could not read a script. I guarantee it. A lot of people from this generation can't ad lib. Which works better, you think?
I think,
because both can be very successful, and both have been very successful. That's the reason I asked.
Yeah, no, and look, there's a lot of wrestlers that, at least when I started, actually liked getting the proverbial piece of paper. Kurt was like that. Kurt was just like, just tell me what to say. I don't have to worry about it. I'll just, like a machine, input it into my brain, and I'll deliver it flawlessly. A lot of people
could memorize the whole paper, right?
Yeah, it was insane. He'd just go off and, okay, take all the time you need. I'll try to get it to you as early as possible. And then, and out he would come with the whole thing. But I think, it's interesting because WWE, it's like Vince, I know, took a stance at a certain point where it's like, well, this is an entertainment show on television. And, if you're going to compare it to Saturday Night Live, which is, almost, at least in the ballpark of the same comp as far as a long running institution of a show that has a revolving cast and a revolving set of writers, and has the stars, and it's, you know, up and coming people and all that kind of thing. And his viewpoint was like, well, they don't just go out and improvise. Like, everything is scripted. You need to know what they're saying, because the camera needs to know, like, you know, the reaction shots, the truck needs to know, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, as you guys are well aware of, up until, you know, maybe 2002, 2003, you're talking decades upon decades upon decades of very, very successful wrestling, which the concept of someone writing a script would be laughed out of the building. You would never do that. That's, you know, all the people who've gotten over in the history of the business did so on their own. That's how you survived. You got yourself over, whether through your work or through your promo, or more than likely a combination of both. So, you know, I was put in a position where some people definitely wanted, like, okay, what do you got for me? And other people were like, oh my God, this fucking guy, I got, you know, and I, you know, and I'm talking, you know, specifically about someone like Steve Austin, who, you know, became the most over talent in the history of the business. The last thing I wanted to do was give him a piece of paper. But at the same time, I'm ping-ponging between him and Vince, because Vince is like, okay, this is now a publicly traded company, and it's not the same as like 1998, 1999. We're now, you know, we're trying to attract sponsors. I want to know exactly what he's going to say. So it put me in a very precarious position, because the people who didn't want it word for word, I certainly didn't want to dictate to them and tell them to do it word for word. If, you know, but at the same time, the boss wanted it that way. So I always think it's the best use of a writer, a WWE writer, is a sounding board. And I mean, that's how you did your promos, John. I mean, you basically had the ability to rattle off an entire 20-minute promo off the top of your head, but you had someone, whether it was, you know, sometimes it was Alex Greenfield, sometimes it was me if I was at SmackDown, sometimes it was, you know, DJ or whoever, to be like, okay, here's all the points I'm going to make. Here's everything I'm going to say. Hey, what if you said this? Hey, yeah, that's a good idea. I can include that. Or, nah, I think I'll just keep it this way, or whatever it is. I think that is the most effective version of it. And I think they're going more towards that now in 2022 from what I've, you know, in terms of talking to wrestlers, talking to writers. I think it's kind of gone full circle now to where it was, you know, when I was working there, which was, at least when I was working there earlier on, which is like let me get together with the talent. Let's see what their thoughts are. Let's see, you know, I'll add some things, or at least construct it so, you know, everyone kind of has a good idea of where it's going. Because like when you have a talent, in my opinion, when you have a talent that's like comfortable in their own skin and truly feeling the promo and the character and feeling what that character would say, because that's what that character would do, as opposed to, well, let me say this line because this line was approved and I need to say this line because it's written on a paper. Those, I think, are the crappy promos. The ones, you know, you take a JBL promo where he's like, you know, it's just like coming from his heart. You could tell he's in full JBL mode. He's in full, like 100% ownership of that character. And you know, like, this is like, no one else would say this promo. Only JBL would say this promo, because that's JBL. If you have a promo where you just look at it on paper and you say, all right, who said that? Oh God, I don't know. It could be anybody. That's usually a crappy promo, because, you know, the promo itself has to be so ingrained into the specific character in order for it to work. So that's my feeling, is that it's always a healthy combination with the talent leading the charge, ideally. But if they have a million other things to worry about, like a 20-minute match, or, you know, and that's something writers can't really, you know, contextualize, because they don't take bumps. They don't, you know, they have no idea like what the mechanics in terms of going into a, you know, like I'd forget everything after 2 seconds if I was ever in a match. So sometimes, yeah, all right, why don't you take the lead, put something together, show me what I'll got, show me what I've got, and then I'll give you feedback. Sometimes that works, sometimes the opposite way works, but it's always much better to be working together as opposed to like, here, this was approved, can I change it? I'll have to ask, you know, that's the worst.
Right.
And that was, you know, unfortunately, I think that was the case for many years, just because for many different factors, including time, including sponsorships, including PG, blah, 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 blah. But fortunately, I think, you know, that's all changing now.
Yeah, it's just interesting because every generation will argue that one generation or another is better. but they all drew money. You know, we drew great ratings in the Attitude Era and after the Attitude Era. These guys today are still drawing great ratings and huge crowds. So there's several different ways it can work. And Brian, I know you got to run, so I want to thank you for coming on the show.
I have one last question. That's a yes or no. Brian, did you ever have any desire to be a character in the ring?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Let me qualify that, because I did write about it in the book. For like half a second, when I very first started, I was like, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, maybe I could be, I can't take bump. Maybe I could be a new Mean Gene, and I could, be like, and then I saw what it actually takes that goes into that, and the way they're, almost sometimes the backstage announcers get more, notes and abuse than anybody. So I think like there was like maybe a 1 week period in 2000 where I was like, maybe, and then that completely went away. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm totally happy doing what I'm doing. Because that's a disaster too, I think, if you once you start actually becoming an on-screen character and you have the proverbial pencil.
Oh yeah.
I don't think anything good can come of that.
That rarely ever works.
Never.
Well, Brian, you're one of the good guys, and you're one of the best guys, because you're certainly one of the smartest guys. And me and Jerry had to wait 2 years to get you on the show, and it was worth every second. So, Brian, thank you so much. We're happy for your success. Can't wait for Tales of the Territories for your book that I've already read.
October 4th, starring Gerald.
Yes. Yes, and by the way, John, if I ever write a second book, I promise to get it to you at a slight discount.
I still get my discount though.
Yeah, no, you still get a comp.
Unbelievable.